The Central Bank of Nigeria has announced the reintroduction of several key economic policies, including the Purchasing Managers Index, the Business Expectation Survey, and the Inflation Expectation Reports to actually promote transparency and accountability in the Nigerian economy. Now, these reports, according to the statement by the Acting Director of Corporate Communications, Hakama Sidi Ali, will provide stakeholders with timely and accurate insights into the country's economic performance. This morning, I'm pleased to inform you that Segun Sopitan, principal partner at Woodridge and Scott Consulting, joins us live in our studios to delve into this particular topic. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So the CBN highlighted the importance of these reports for policymakers, but I'd like you to talk about the specific economic policy decisions that the PMI, BES, and the IER usually influence.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to acknowledge that perhaps this is a move in the right direction. We have suffered a dearth of data as a country for a long time, and you know, everybody, especially in the business space, complains about this. So that the CBN has decided to return to some of these reports is good for the economy, is good for all of the various stakeholders and players within the economy. One slight concern that I do have, however, is some of these reports exist in one form or the other across different spaces. Especially, I would wonder how the CBN will be collaborating with the National Bureau of Statistics in producing these reports. The Inflation Expectation Survey, for example, one would hope that there will be some sort of collaboration with the NBS to ensure that we don't have a duplicity of data being thrown out from official government quarters. We've seen this happen in the past where the CBN will publish actual inflation numbers, and then I can't remember their old name before they became the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, would also publish inflation numbers, and they would differ. You know, so one would hope that you would see some more collaboration to ensure that there is a harmonization of the data coming out from government agencies responsible for providing that for the economy. Yeah. So to then address your question. The PMI particularly is of interest. Right now, we have PMI being published by different private data and research desks across different organizations. Some banks, you know, do this. Some economic publications do this. And what you have is, you know, you then have to rely on these different disparate sources. So it's a good thing, excuse me, if we can harmonize this and know that we're getting the information from a trusted source, especially one as, you know, sound as the CBN.
Okay, so but before you move on, I'd like us to still touch on the issue around the duplicity of information, because before now, there used to be gaps in the publication of these reports, and probably that was one of the reasons why that had to be, or these reports had to be excluded. And now we are still talking about the issue around duplicity and in some quarters what they call inconsistencies, either from one channel or from multiple channels. And if we don't have an harmonization of accuracy in data, then it would actually inform decisions or policies that might not really reflect or benefit the Nigerian economy. So how are we so sure now that the reintroduction of these three key reports will be accurate, will be consistent, and will also speak to factuality in terms of what is being presented?
Yeah, you know, I mean, we can't be sure, but I'm optimistic that given the experiences of the past, that the CBN would not make the same mistakes that previous CBNs had made. And it's also important to note that the NBS does not have a PMI report. The PMI reports that we do get now come from different private sector players who just take the initiative because the information is important. So getting that from the CBN now, I think is a good step. Maybe the NBS would have been better placed to be doing that, since they already have a very structured, well-resourced channels of conducting these surveys. right? But if the CBN decides that they want to do it, I think it's fine as long as they're working hand in hand, with the MBS. So it's a good thing. I'm sure that we will see some harmonization this time, and I think it's important that we're getting the information from government sources now, from official quarters, and it bears saying that the PMI, which speaks to the question you asked earlier, the PMI, the inflation expectation, the business expectation surveys, all of these numbers are critical for policy formulation, especially in the private sector. Different investment desks require these things to measure the direction that the economy is generally moving in terms of manufacturing, for example. And we all know that the best economies must have a strong, sound manufacturing base. The higher the industrialization level of the manufacturing, the better for that economy. You would also want to see a lot of services, being rendered within that economy. The PMI will measure the health of those sectors. The PMI for manufacturing and the PMI for services should be provided, periodically to enable investors determine the sentiment within the market and how things are shaping up within the market, whether the economy is healthy and expanding and growing, or whether it's contracting, which will then determine, what kind of appetite for investments, these investors and investment analysts should be recommending to their various stakeholders. So it's absolutely good and commendable that these numbers are being put forward. And I think we should just ensure that we don't have any kind of inconsistencies from these two major government organs.
Okay, so let's you've talked about the PMI and how it affects the manufacturing industries. Let's look at the other reports too. That is the business expectation survey and how it would influence or interpret the business climate in Nigeria, probably the economic trends as we see now.
So typically markets are largely driven by sentiments. How investors feel about what's happening in an economy tends to determine what they do with their capital and with their money, right? So these surveys tend to try to put numbers to the sentiment of the market per time. So whilst you have an inflation report being published by the MBS periodically, that is now a sound, solid data structure that we have that guides investment decisions. It's also good to have a report that tries to measure, how the players within that economy are relating with that information regarding inflation. So because that will then tell you what direction investment might be flowing, which will determine what's happening in the various markets, stock market, even the foreign exchange markets, and all of that will tend to be impacted by these surveys. I think it's absolutely good that you will have a number that is trying to gauge or measure the barometer of the market, when it comes to market sentiment, because that can then determine, what will happen with investment flows. So it's encouraging that this is being done. I hope it's sustained, and I hope that, like I said before, we don't have any kind of inconsistencies or conflicts between the various sources.
Okay, so let's also look at the inflation expectation report that actually measures the expected rate of inflation among various economic agents. This information is actually at the beck and call of the Central Bank of Nigeria. But then we keep seeing, the Apex Bank coming out with monetary policy tightening that seems not to be auguring well for the Nigerian economy. Is actually inflating, inflationary pressures and expectations on the people, and it's actually hurting businesses too in terms of the hike in the interest rate. So what are your thoughts as regards this particular report, the CBN being at the top of it, and how it is interpreting or even reacting to the inflation in the country?
I would imagine that one of the reasons that the CBN is actually publishing this now is to give the markets, the economy, the entire economy, some sort of insight as to the reasons that they take the decisions that they take at the monetary policy committees. because I would imagine that the research department of the CBN actually already conducts this surveys and already has these numbers. What they are now doing is to put that information out, to the market, to say to all of us, look, this is what is driving decision making. And I think that's why the CBN said that they're publishing this report now to enhance transparency and accountability. So if the NPC, for example, is saying that they want to tighten further, by increasing the monetary policy rate by, say 500 basis points, the question that would always play out in the minds of, watchers of the economy is why? What's driving this decision? So you would have things like the money supply report, for example, and if you can then add to that the fact that the market sentiment is negative towards what's happening with inflation, and maybe that's one of the reasons that they're deciding to say not tighten further. That information would help provide an insight into why they're doing what they're doing. And I think that transparency is important. It gives people the comfort and the confidence that these decisions are being taken in good faith. There's a lot of skepticism, within the marketplace as to why, till now, is the CBN, for example, continuing to hike NPR. So I think availability of reports like this may help deal with some of that skepticism and provide some confidence, within the market. And market confidence, like I said before, sentiment is very important in the direction that markets move. So market confidence, any measure that would help with confidence building and boosting, is a welcome measure on the part of the regulator.
So for policymakers and investors, do you think these would actually also help them too? Because we know that for investors, this kind of information will help them understand what kind of decision, how the economy is like, then what kind of decision they need to take, whether they need to further put in their funds or maybe just retreat a bit. So when we look at the data, the interpretation, the usability, the availability, and of course usability, do you think it would also help them too?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you take the business expectation survey, for example, so what that does is it tells the market, how, the players and the operators within the markets are feeling about the economy, and who best knows how an economy is doing other than the people that are operating the economy. So if you conduct a survey of, say, all of the CFOs, combine the CFOs, combine CEOs, maybe, COOs across different large, pardon me.
Sorry.
Excuse me, yeah. Across different organized private sector players within the economy, what they are seeing and what they are feeling within their different organizations will drive what their sentiment and expectations are with regards to the direction the economy is going. So if you can put a number to those sentiments, it would absolutely help, policymakers to drive their decisions with regards to what direction the market is expected to move. So I think it's one thing to have the information about where the market is, what inflation is doing, what interest rate is doing, and all of that. But then when the operators within the economy begin to feel a sense of foreboding, that, look, it looks as if the economy might be contracting, for example, that on its own tells a story to an investment analyst and a policymaker, and they may then want to become a bit cautious in what they do. If, on the other hand, some of these reports and surveys show a positive, bullish sentiment towards the economy, again, as a policymaker, you may then begin to say, look, hey, maybe there's an opportunity to invest in this market because the players think that the market is moving in the right direction. So, all of this data can only help improve the efficiency and the functionality of our economy and our markets generally.
All right, and I actually like the fact that you actually harped on the need for information accuracy, and of course the fact that it will help in the effectiveness of the kind of policies that can drive growth in the Nigerian economy. We hope that the market and the business environment will be able to shape and react positively to these reports that will be churned out by the CBN periodically. Segun Sopitan, Principal Partner, Woodridge and Scott Consulting, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the show.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.